So, welcome, guys. Thanks for tuning in. The thing I wanted to discuss in detail tonight was how does Bitcoin or cryptocurrency get to a billion users? And last night I spoke a little bit about why we emphasize and how much importance we place around the US and this ETF at present. But why, at the end of the day, that's not the determining factor to the success of Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. And then Vitalik came out and tweeted this today. So I think there's too much emphasis on Bitcoin or ETH, whatever ETFs. Not enough emphasis on making it easier for people to buy $5 of cryptocurrency or $5 to $100, small amounts. Via cards at corner stores, but even a step further, just with smartphones. That's what I want to discuss tonight, and in those developing countries. So the former is obviously better for pumping the price. If we get an ETF, yes, the price is going to go up pretty quickly. But the latter is much better for actual adoption. And guys, over the long run, if you think we get a billion people using crypto, of course that's going to be good for the price, but it's good for humanity as well. And all these reasons that we got into cryptocurrency and blockchain in the first place. So let's unpack this idea and talk about the industries it overlaps with, what's happening, how this is going to unfold in the future. So thanks to everyone that's watching. Thanks to everyone that's hitting that like button. Let's dive in and check out some of these articles. So today, the largest movie theater chain in Thailand starting to accept cryptocurrency. And this is pretty big news. The partners here, 1,000 screens, widely watched in all the big, highly populated areas. But the partnerships here recognize 1 million active users. So targeting those million users to use cryptocurrency, not just at the movie theater, but throughout the country at malls. I think this is located at one of the leading business districts. So look, Thailand's financial ecosystem, this company here, Rapids Pay, will expand to other businesses and lead the charge for Thailand's ecosystem to be cashless. And this is a little look at that app. So read that article in full there for more detail. But this is what we sometimes forget when people say, well, why would I pay for something in Bitcoin in Australia or the US? And look, at the moment we've got reasonably well merchant services and PayPass and all that sort of thing. But I'm going to talk about how that is not a good representation of the entire world and how banks, financial systems, money and cash in society works, okay, and all the problems that need to be solved still. So these are all free articles, guys, and newsletters and emails that I get and I read through. And China is probably the one that everyone talks about, but I'm going to touch on India as well and Africa at the end. These hugely densely populated countries, and we're talking 1 billion people. Sometimes we forget in Australia we've only got 25 million people, and we all love crypto, but there's a lot more people out there that can get into crypto. So the challenge of China's emerging affluent class, and I want to talk about the rise of the middle class. So this is talking about all these people that have come out of poverty, and as the industrial world has really grown, China have really started exporting to the rest of the world, and you make all those goods made in China. We've all sort of seen the labels, but look, this is sort of what they're saying now. These people are maturing. Elevating your career beyond success and giving back to your family, juggling it all, becoming more efficient, broadening their worldview, enhancing the wellness and maintaining momentum, and love and peace of mind, which is a big part of that culture. But that's not really what I want to focus on. This is just sort of touching on what the average middle class citizen is, kind of going through here. But I really want to dive into the stats and the numbers here. So this is a report from only a few days ago, the China Internet Report. This is the US versus China. As I say, we put all this emphasis on the US. So let's dive in and have a look at the numbers. So the number of users on the internet. So China's got a population of 1.4 billion, but they've got 55% of those, 770 million internet users, compared to the US, which obviously has a higher percentage, around 90%. But, that number absolutely been dwarfed by the numbers coming from China. They're more than triple. So the same with smartphones. Yes, only half of people have a smartphone in China, but the number, in terms of millions, again, it's more than triple in the US. The same here if we go to mobile internet. I'm going to talk about that infrastructure being rolled out in developing countries. Same again, triple. And, what's this? A factor of 10. So 520 million users familiar and using mobile payments in China. And that's obviously a step closer to cryptocurrency. And they do love the phones, live on their apps, watch videos. I'm going to talk about all that as well. So I'm going to skip through a lot of this, guys. This is $77 billion of valuation just coming from Hong Kong and Shenzhen there. So top 4 cities in terms of unicorns, companies that are worth over $1 billion. So yes, this is a tech hub. There's plenty of money and investment that is going to go into blockchain space. We already see it happening. It's going to benefit those Chinese coins, immensely as all these companies look to explore blockchain technology as well. So skip past a lot of these guys, and there's a few other numbers I wanted to show you here. So we often think that blockchain and cryptocurrency can't work in rural areas because they don't have smartphones or internet access, but the numbers are definitely showing otherwise. So look at this growth in the last 10 years from 7% to 35% internet penetration in rural areas in China. Now, this is the same sort of aggressive growth that we're going to see throughout India and Africa as well. And I want to talk about that more at the end. A few of these other numbers. I think I just wanted to show you the last part here. So the government, the invisible hand of the government. And we know that they cracked down on exchanges and ICOs in September. Then in December, China's central bank, the regulatory commission, tightened rules around the internet finance and peer-to-peer lending. I'm going to talk about those blockchain projects in that space a little bit. So reducing the number of companies from 6,000 down to 2,000. So China have cracked down on all this big time. They're getting their house in order and getting regulation, and all the companies will have to register and all that sort of thing. But when they sort of release this and get everyone back into this space, I think people would, again, underestimating how huge of an impact China's going to have, how much money's there, and so on. So another article here, Chinese people just obsessed with these apps and short videos on their phone. They love technology. I think there's somewhere in this app here that people are watching this for 2 hours straight, and that app actually locks you out completely. If you look at this app and watch these small little 30 to 60 second videos on this short video app that people are just becoming obsessed with. And we know how big the gaming industry is. But yeah, absolutely love tech more than Western cultures. So why China? Why now? And last year, China surpassed US in terms of having the biggest GDP in the world. So the biggest economy in the world, which again, just crazy to think about. And some people don't realize all this. We put too much, emphasis and power on the US. They're in the headlines every day. Trump making decisions and running the world. And the truth is that they don't have that much of a say in terms of exports, imports. People can make up their own minds, and I think that's another reason that eventually we're going to see a move away from the US dollar. No currency has been the reserve currency of the world for more than sort of 40 years in general, and the US is obviously past that now, so it's overdue to be replaced. China's share of exports around the world, look at that, growing from 25% up to 35% there in the resources boom just before the financial crisis. Obviously, Australia is a very resource-rich country. That's the thing that drives our GDP. China and Africa trade, the Belt Road. I'll leave you to read this in more detail if you want. But this is the thing that really matters. How much government funding is going into AI and entrepreneurship here. And, the latest figures from 2016 here, this is only going to continue to grow exponentially. And I think the stats are, it might have been the last slide here somewhere, that 8% of all government funding needs to go into 8%. Yeah, so the minimum of local government's annual budget has to be spent on digitalization of education. So these people are coming out of school with good education about the latest tech and all that sort of thing. So there's money being pumped into this left, right, and center. Now, the rise of the middle class, and some of those numbers that we've seen are, 1 billion people by 2020, and that's just in China. So keep those numbers in mind. Tourism taking off in a big way. Obviously, we benefit from that in Australia. We've got a great relationship. Just in the last 10 years since the GFC here, look, 500% growth in tourism from this world index. And this is just general measures of hotels, restaurants, leisure, holidays, all that sort of thing versus the stock market here. So people are going out, people are traveling and spending, and that, I think this is just the start, guys. A few 100 million people in the middle class of China. What happens when there's 1 billion people that want to go out? And we've already seen in Australia in housing, they want to buy and they drive prices up when they want to travel and all that sort of thing. But these people want the latest smartphones. Obviously, if they travel in Australia, we have plenty of places now where you can spend Bitcoin, book your holiday, Brisbane Airport, travel by bit. We've covered all that on the channel. It all ties in together. So this was an article that was floating around a lot in 2014, 2015. It caused a huge stir on Reddit. Western Union even asked Reddit to take this down at one stage because it was just sort of, this image was causing such a stir and people just saying, look, Western Union ripped people off, and also to all these remittance. And at the time, Bitcoin, there was a stage where you could send Bitcoin for a $0 transfer fee, and your transaction would be included in the next block. The miners would include it just because they get the mining reward. So it wasn't even really competition as we see now for whoever pays the highest fee gets included first. And a lot of blocks are full these days, guys. And I don't need to dive into that argument about scaling, but that's just the fact that a lot of Bitcoin blocks are full. And fees can be high from time to time compared to what they were a few years ago. This here is just a clear visual representation of how easy it is to send money to anyone instantly anywhere in the world once they have a Bitcoin wallet installed on their smartphone. We've seen those numbers. I'll show you at the end. Send and receive. It's 1 or 2 clicks versus all this paperwork required to send money, and I'm going to dive into how expensive that currently is. So these are the top remittance corridors. So remittance is just sending money from one country to another over borders. And the Mexico-US is obviously the biggest corridor there. $25 billion annually. And these stats are from 2015, so that's probably only growing. And then obviously, we know China-US got a lot of relations there. But they look down this list and all these different countries, and a lot of the time they have to switch into US dollars. Now, certain countries are starting to trade oil, in petro or gold. We've seen Russia and China talk about trading in yuan. So look, there's certainly a move away from this everything has to be done in the US dollar mentality, and we're already seeing some trade in Bitcoin, particularly those sanctioned nations. Why wouldn't they use cryptocurrency to circumnavigate the sanctions? So this is a website you can have a play around with, remittanceprices.worldbank.org. Just click a random 2 countries that, as I have here, and have a look at the price to send money between them through some of these banks. And this is pretty standard stuff, guys, anywhere from 5% to 25%. So if you want to send someone $100, you're going to get a bad exchange rate, and some of these less traded currencies will have a spread of between 10 and 20%. So let's say the Australian and Canadian dollar are both trading at 100 cents to the US dollar. So they're both at, a dollar is a dollar. But if I actually want to buy $1 worth of Canadian dollars, it might cost me $1.10. So there's a 10% spread, or 5%, 20%, depending on what the numbers are. But that's pretty normal, particularly between these less traded currencies. So to have $1.10 as the buy price, 90 cents as the sell price if you're coming home with different currencies, but the mid price to be $1. So I hope I've explained that well, but that's how wide the spreads can be. And on top of that spread where you're losing money, you're also paying a fee. So it might cost me, let's say $110 to buy $100 worth of Canadian dollars if I'm going there on holiday, but I'm also paying this fee, whatever it is, 10 or 20%, so $10 or $20. So, the whole exercise can be in the vicinity of 30 to 40% just to change currencies when going between different countries. Now, obviously with Bitcoin, it's whatever the fee is at the time. Hopefully the network's not too congested and we're talking, cents. So now, there's other payment platforms, and the thing that I always find funny when I read all my emails from the traditional investing world, I like Livewire. They've touched a little bit on cryptocurrency, but, it's still pretty taboo in their eyes. But they'll talk about things like the rise of Afterpay. So Afterpay is a company that lets you pay after the fact in 4 installments. You set out those repayments. This has just been hugely popular with people sort of, rather than borrowing from a bank or putting it on a credit card, this sort of afterpay repayment process. And I hear things like this, and I hear about these new forms of payment that banks are trying to jazz things up with these instant send features and all these things that the guys from these stock backgrounds are talking about. Well-educated people, you're sort of jumping up and down, waving hands, going, cryptocurrency is doing all of this already, if not better. Okay, so this is just, keep in mind that these stock investors, they love tech. They're all hungry for the next tech stock. Facebook and Twitter had big dives the other day. A few other, big companies in the tech space really dragged down that NASDAQ tech index in the US. But people want to invest in tech, and here we are jumping up and down, saying, look, there's plenty of awesome startups, but they're not on the stock market. They're in the blockchain space. Now, talking about that lending and the companies that are doing this in the crypto space, there's been some pretty worrying headlines about Salt. And I don't want to spread any FUD because I really liked Salt and I did fundamental analysis on it, how that was going to work. I think the Salt membership was $25, but yet Salt was trading individually, and that peg, and we see it in Forex, in currencies, it just doesn't work. If you peg something that can be freely traded in other markets, it's going to break. And Salt's trading for, a couple of dollars, or I'm not sure exactly what it's trading for now, $1 or whatever. And yet when you're telling people that membership costs $25, yet they can buy it for $1, and people were buying ledgers with their Salt tokens, there might have been 6 Salt tokens for a ledger, where you could buy 6 Salt tokens for $6 now and then buy a ledger. So if things get out of whack, something's going to give. Now, I'm not sure exactly what happened here. All these blockchain-based projects that were interfacing with the traditional financial system, and they need to get bank licenses, lending licenses, insurance. Those are the projects that are really struggling. 10x, Monaco, all those card issuers, all these lending platforms have really had headaches, and it's because of it's hard to get those licenses. It's hard to get relationships with banks going. But Nexo here, rumored to maybe be trying to buy out Salt, and they're also in that space. So keep an eye on those headlines, guys. Ethland is another project. They've got a pretty decent support here in Australia as well. There's plenty in this space trying to do collateral and crypto-backed loans. Mike Novogratz, his fund invested 52 million fundraising here led a $52 million fundraiser for BlockFi. So another one that's, rubbing shoulders with Wall Street. If Mike Novogratz is behind that one. So very interesting. But Make It Die is the one that people don't realize, that you can build these collateralized debt positions. So if you've got $10,000 of Ethereum, let's say, and you don't want to sell it, you need to borrow that money, or you think crypto is going to go up and you don't want to sell it at the lows. Sorry guys, that's not working here. Let's see if I can get this to load back up. Computer's having a nightmare. Sorry guys, I'll try and bring that up. No, it's dead. It's frozen. Basically, Make It Die allows you to borrow money, put up Ethereum. They're going to allow other tokens in future here as well. I'll get out of that. That page is completely dead. The computer's not liking streaming tonight, guys. Okay, I won't bring that up. Basically, you can build collateralized debt positions by putting up your Ethereum, or in the future DGX and gold. So anything that's stable. The maker, the governance token, the community decides how risky that is and how much collateral you need to put up to get a loan in DAI, in the stable coin. Now you can use that DAI to pay off bills or buy a new car or whatever, rather than going to the bank. If crypto goes up in price in the future, that sort of pays itself off. If crypto was to double, well, then you've paid off your own loan because that's gone up in price. So if you don't want to sell crypto and have tax implications, there's ways around it. And I'm sorry that maker portal's frozen. I'll bring that up again in another video. But that's another way to create money, or get a bank loan, DAI is a stable coin. You can go and borrow that money, then sell that on an exchange. And you've basically created money out of thin air, but your Ethereum's locked in a smart contract until you repay it. Now, tying this all together, last year we really saw euphoria. So 100,000 new users per day in Coinbase. As I've spoken about before, I've seen some of the stats in Australia in terms of hundreds of thousands of users on different exchanges. I'd go as far as to say there's almost 1 million between all the exchanges put together. Now, yes, a lot of people have a couple of accounts with each exchange, so take those numbers with a grain of salt. But still, those numbers are crazy in terms of the percent of the overall population in Australia that has an account. And yet, you think about how small our population is: 25 million. What's the percent of people that are actually, in that age bracket that are interested in crypto and sort of thing? It's, a few million people, if that. So think about that billion number of middle-class citizens, hundreds of millions now. In a couple of years' time, they're saying 1 billion. Now, that's just in China. Now, add that to India, that are really starting to take a liking to crypto and gold and anti-dollar assets. Add that to Africa. It's an absolute prime target for that remittance market. Once they all have an internet, they all have a smartphone. And look at this smartphone penetration. So some of the stats of mobile phones are around 90%. So just about everyone now, even in developing countries, has a mobile phone. But the percent of smartphones is growing. So here we see South Korea. Everyone loves it. Obviously Australia, Japan. But China here up to 50%. And that keep those hundreds of millions of people heading towards 1 billion number in mind. But then we have Indonesia, China, and obviously Africa, that these really low percentages. And what happens when those hundreds of million, or let's call it a total, in the next few years, we might have 2 billion people that have a smartphone that can become their own bank, start their own business, borrow money for lending. They've got a good idea. So that tool, that smartphone, is such a powerful tool these days. We often forget what it allows. And these developing countries can skip the infrastructure. They can really see these aggressive growth rates, because unlike in Australia, where we've had these huge issues with the broadband network, we're rolling out fibre and then it's too expensive. They basically canned it a lot on the mainland for the time being. We had it in Tasmania. We're very lucky. But bad internet, we've got banks, we've got power lines. That's 3 industries that can be skipped with 5G networks, which are going to be faster than this copper internet, or even fibre in some cases. And that's coming. That's coming to these countries. They can skip banks. Okay, once you've got your smartphone, you can use banking or financial services all through apps. Okay, and skipping those power lines. We're not going to see power lines running through Africa. Okay, we already see in their schools and in parts of the world solar panels. So think about the potential there for Power Ledger to do their project, or WePower. Solara, Electrify Asia, all these projects that are working on that space, working on solutions to cut out that infrastructure of all the copper power lines and centralized power grids. Think about all the lending services, people that are going to want to invest in emerging markets in those developing countries with their cryptocurrency, rather than have the banks, put people into debt, control their future. Don't get me started on how banks and governments use power and debt to just entrap people. Imagine if we can fund communities directly, not just charity, but actually funding communities. And Power Ledger want to get into that with asset germination, all that sort of thing. I don't want to talk about too many projects, but think about all the agriculture throughout these countries. And now we've got all the logistics projects, VeChain, Wabi. You guys know that I love Blockgrain. What happens when farmers in that country can show what's on their land? They can sell to users abroad. They can get, financial services, maybe borrow some money because they can clearly show the value, transfer that, organize the logistics. Look, the world is just going to change, guys, in the next generation or so, and it's very exciting to watch. I love thinking about the future. I love looking at these statistics when we sometimes live in our own little 9-to-5 bubbles in the country that we're in, and we forget that there's going to be billions of people. Every day our smartphones get more powerful. Think about how much the world has changed in the past 10 years with things that didn't exist: YouTube, Facebook, the list goes on. The apps and the things that have changed our lives. So I hope you've enjoyed that, guys. Something a little bit different tonight. Leave some comments below. Again, I'm not an expert on this. I'm just sharing my opinions, and you guys have got a very smart community. Leaving comments, questions, they help me. They help me build my next episodes I want to talk about. So thanks to everyone that's leaving those likes, subscribing, commenting, and sharing those videos around. And I'll talk to you again soon, guys. Cheers.